Hi, it's Steph, and it is Memorial Day weekend. And as the month comes to a close, I realized that I never did a May garden tour this year. So I thought that we could spend some time together and do a little walk and talk through the garden. We'll start here on one of my front borders. This is what I call my retaining wall bed. And look at this peony. It is loaded with bloom buds. This is the Shirley Temple, and this is the most blooms I've ever seen on it. It is in full sun all day and clearly very happy in this spot. I am glad that I got that support on this peony early so that it can hold up the weight of all of these beautiful blooms that we're about to get. But that is a real pretty one. It's a white peony with a little bit of a blush pink, maybe even a dabble of red in the center, like a speckle. Very pretty. And here I have a really pretty shrub. This is the My Monet Purple Effect Weigela. It has a variegated foliage of green and cream, and then it gets almost like a blush pink on the tips. So it's very colorful and pretty. It is currently in bloom with these purple pink tubular shaped blooms that the bumblebees and hummingbirds love. And as soon as it's done blooming, the foliage gets much larger, and it's a really striking shrub. The month of May was for the alliums here in my garden. They are really making an impact, and I planted them en masse, so they really made a statement and are so noticeable from the street. I really love them. But on the downside is that the variety that I planted en masse is the Purple Sensation. And while the bloom is very pretty because it's a deeper shade of purple, the foliage is terrible. And the best way to plant allium bulbs, which I know this, but in this bed it didn't quite work out that way, is to make sure that you plant the bulbs between perennials that will have foliage large enough to cover the dying allium foliage. Because just about the time where the allium starts to bloom, their foliage goes really terrible and yellow and burnt and just old, and it needs to be cut off. And so I had to go through and clean up most of the foliage on this allium bed, but here you can see that there's still some in the back that's dying back, and it's very unsightly. So if you are going to plant alliums, you want to make sure that you plant those bulbs between other perennials so that it can disguise that allium foliage that dies back a little bit better. But they still look really beautiful. They've gotten knocked around a little bit with the wind, but most of them are still standing. The peony that I have planted on the other end of the bed is also loaded with buds, and this is a white variety. The name escapes me at the moment, but it's also really pretty. And my Olivia Rose Austin rose is getting ready to bloom as well. And all of the nepeta in the front of the border is also looking really pretty. This is the Proven Winners Cat's Pajamas nepeta, which is a shorter and more compact variety. The bumblebees love it, and it has a minty fragrance, which I really like. And the deer and rabbits stay away from it because they don't like the smell. But you can see that my rose here, this is going to be, I think, the first one to open up. It's a very pretty light pink rose. And candy tuft or Iberis, gorgeous perennial. I love it. It blooms really early in spring, and I have gotten it over the last couple of years to place in containers. And when they're done in my containers, I have planted them here along the border. So I have 4 of them now, and I do plan on dividing them and adding some more all along my front borders because I really love them. Heading into the backyard, this heritage river birch that we planted a couple of seasons ago now is looking really beautiful. The bark provides a lot of winter interest as it peels, and I really love this tree. And heading over to our patio bed, this Japanese maple has leafed out beautifully. This is the garnet, has a really beautiful canopy, a lace leaf foliage, and I love the pop of red in this area. I have another My Monet Purple Effect Weigela right in this corner, also looking gorgeous and in full bloom. You can see that foliage here, which is very pretty. Along the front edge of this border, I have some Acorus sweet flag planted. It's a grass texture perennial. It likes moist soils, which is great because this bed holds on to a little bit of moisture, and it stays this color all year round, even in the winter. It does get a little bit paler yellow in the winter months, but when it warms up in spring and in summer, it gets a nice vibrant yellow with a green stripe because it is variegated, but I really like it. And right behind it, I have a dwarf or more compact panicle type hydrangea called the Firelight Tidbit. I planted them 2 seasons ago and they're growing beautifully. They only get to be on average about 3 by 3 in size, which is perfect for this area. And behind the Firelight Tidbits, I planted a perennial that I was after for a couple of years, and I finally found it at a local nursery last season. It is the Onyx and Pearls Penstemon, and it was large enough in the nursery can for me to divide in 2, so I did that, and I planted one here, and I have one down there. So I'm happy to see that the divisions transplanted and survived the winter beautifully. And the poppies that we sowed in the snow, you can see I have poppy seedlings in here and they're growing. And I did lose a perennial this season, which was a bummer. I planted it last spring. It didn't come back. It was a thalictrum or a meadow rue. So always a bummer when you lose plants. And some other perennials that will be blooming shortly. But you can see I have a ton of Asiatic lily babies. I did find a red lily beetle the other day, which is never good. They usually decimate the foliage and the lilies look terrible. They won't bloom. So that was not great. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that yet. I'm just going to let it go and see what happens. Here's that other penstemon. This one's a little bit larger. And I did buy another meadow rue or thalictrum, and I planted it there. So hopefully that one makes it through this winter. And something that I planted new this year, a new bulb that I wanted to try, Camasias. They worked out beautifully. Camasias are a bulb that can take a little bit more moisture in soil, and this bed has a tendency to do that. It holds on to moisture, and the Camasias did really well. I've lost a ton of daffodils over the years due to the bulbs rotting, and so I thought, well, let's try these and see how they go, and they went really well. My geum, also known as Avens, did not do so great this year. It is blooming, but it has bloomed so much more in years past. So this tells me that it is time to divide these up. So I'll be working on that this fall. I started a running list in my phone of plants that need dividing and moving for the fall. I have a really busy spring, so all of that will have to wait. I don't like to divide perennials as we get into the later part of spring or heading into summer because it will require a lot more babying them. You'll have to water them more frequently to make sure that they survive the summer heat. So making a list and doing it in the fall is a better way for me to do it. So I'm going to do that. But these are gorgeous. They bloom for a really long time. They have these little peachy colored blooms that are dainty. They look like little rosettes. There are still tons of buds that are going to open up. So still some more blooms coming, but they last a while. This variety is again Mai Tai, and it's a really pretty one. The foliage is also really pretty. Heading over to my shed beds, I have some columbine or aquilegia that is blooming. This one is gorgeous. I planted them here a couple of years ago. I actually started these from seed. This variety is the Nora Barlow, and look how pretty that is. Isn't that stunning? I love these so much. They're petite flowers. They're on these tall stems. They do require a little bit of staking because we've been so windy lately. So I have these half circle stakes that work really well. I picked up a package on Amazon last year. I've been using them everywhere. Fatala echinacea for my irises this season that the wind has been knocking over, and I love them. So they're holding my columbine up really nicely. You can see I also have I believe this is called Black Knight. There's a different name for this one, but this one I did buy as a bare root plant from Longfield Gardens. Black Barlow is what it's called. That's what it is. So the Nora Barlow and the Black Barlow look really pretty together. I have a Black Barlow there. I have one in the back and some more Nora. And I did let them self-seed themselves a little bit. And I do see some babies. You can tell because their foliage is very distinct. Let me see if I can find one to share with you. Right here, I can tell that these are columbine seedlings. Right through there. So that's really exciting. That's definitely one. right here. And I have tons of the Verbena bonariensis seedlings that I'll have to go through and thin. Those self-seed like crazy, but I am happy to have some of these columbine also self-seeding. And heading to the other side of the shed, my little lime hydrangea hedge is all leafed out. And I want to show you a new allium that I have that's blooming. First time I planted it this year, it's really pretty. And it's a different color for me. It's actually white. So right here in this bed, I planted a group of 5 Mount Everest alliums. And they're just starting, they're about maybe halfway opened at this point. They should turn into like a baseball-sized bloom. Look at that. So pretty. Now it does have large foliage, but I did what I was saying in the front where you should plant it between other perennials, and here I planted it between the foliage of my lungwort or pulmonaria. Now maybe a video or two back during one of my tours, I had mentioned, I think in the April garden tour, that when this lungwort was all blooming, the foliage is a lot smaller. The same thing happens with plants like brunnera and even shrubs, that while it's in bloom, all of the energy is going to produce the blooms. Once it's done blooming, the foliage gets much larger. And that's what's happening here with this brunnera, or with this lungwort rather, that is done blooming. Look how large the leaves are getting. Now I do need to do some editing here because this lungwort got really large really quick. So I'm going to go through, thin it out, move it to another area of the garden, but it's doing a good job with disguising some of that allium foliage. But I really love this Mount Everest allium. And right here I had planted an Ascot rainbow euphorbia 2 seasons ago. And last year in spring around May, it bloomed beautifully. But this year, the plant is not looking so great. We had a little bit of a weird winter, lost a lot of plants. It was really cold, didn't snow enough to insulate the earth and the plants. So yeah, some things didn't fare well. This is one of them. But the good news is that there is a bunch of new foliage coming up. So hopefully it's fine. And next year we'll get a lot more of these really pretty and interesting blooms. I actually like the Ascot rainbow euphorbia so much that last season I removed some hosta that I had planted here underneath this Ariadne Japanese maple. Because we get a lot of deer in our garden, I always had to spray them with deer and rabbit repellent, and I just didn't like them all that much to have to do that constantly. So I removed them, I passed them along, and what I did was I replaced them with some more of this Ascot rainbow euphorbia. And this one here is doing beautifully. You can see that it is blooming with its unique blooms in this chartreuse color, and it has a lot of new growth. That one there is also blooming and doing well. It's got some new foliage at the bottom, and that one is not doing great, but it does have new foliage right there. So all in all, out of the 3, one's doing great, one's doing okay, one's doing so-so. But hopefully they all survive, start growing some more this season, and do well in this area because I really like them. And the Ito peony that we planted just a few weeks back is starting to bloom. This is by Isley, and it is the Scrumdiddlyumptious Ito peony, and there's a few buds on it. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 blooms. And look at this color on this. Isn't that stunning? It's not all the way open yet, but when it does, it's going to be gorgeous. Here's what that bloom is going to look like when it's all the way open. Isn't that so pretty? So exciting. And if you have a shady garden and you want to plant something really pretty, look at this. This is a Godzilla fern. It is stunning. It gets really large, about 30 to 36 inches tall and wide. So if you have a smaller space, you can add just one of them. If you have a larger area, you can make a drift of these, and they're so pretty. And the lady's mantle, or the Alchemilla mollis, is getting all budded up and will be blooming probably in the next few weeks. This plant is gorgeous. It has such pretty foliage. The blooms are like these sprays of baby's breath. They have this chartreuse yellow-green coloring to them. And the way that the leaves hold on to water droplets is so interesting. Look at that. There's a bead of water in the center there. It almost looks like glass, like a magnifying glass. A very pretty perennial. Coordinates so nicely with other perennials in the garden like nepeta and roses. And they bloom, I feel, for a while. They also self-seed themselves a little bit, so you can get more and plant them around other areas of the garden. And they seem to do well in full sun and in part sun, which this area happens to be. This side seems to get a little bit more sun, and you can see that the buds are already starting to open up and bloom. And in this back woodland corner of the garden, the Twombly's Red Sentinel is still looking gorgeous. This is a more columnar style Japanese maple, and it has a really pretty bright red spring color here in our garden. And right behind it, planted in the tree ring, I have this Korean lilac, which has been here for probably around 5 or 6 years now. And it is gorgeous. Look at this coloring. It is so nice and full. It flowers really well. And that's kind of amazing because it is in a part shade location. Part sun, I would say. It gets a few hours of morning sun, and then it is shaded in the afternoon when it gets warmer. And when the deciduous trees above lose its foliage in fall and in winter, it does get full sun. So I think that's just enough for it to set buds. But I love the way that it looks interplanted with this rhododendron right behind it. They're growing into one another, and I think it makes such a pretty combination. They tend to bloom around the same time, which is really nice. And the fragrance on this lilac is amazing. And right outside my raised bed garden, I have some Ansonia blooming. Now this variety I'm not sure on because a friend shared it with me, but I really love having these beautiful light blue blooms in the spring. Look at this, they're like star-shaped flowers. Very pretty. I've actually cut on this as well to make an arrangement. And right here on our hillside garden, which is a work in progress, I do have another Amsonia that I planted a couple of seasons ago. It is the Hubrechtii, and I did get one bloom out of it this year. Look at that. But this one has more of a thread-like foliage, and it turns a golden color, like a butterscotch color in the fall, which is really nice. And continuing along on our hillside garden, I have a popcorn viburnum that I planted here. It did get a couple of blooms this year, but hopefully over time it will have more blooms. I did have a fig planted here, but it never gave me figs. It was here for about 3 years, so I took it out, and now we have a viburnum. And another lilac. This is the Miss Kim lilac. It's a really pretty one as well. Look at that. Did you know that lilacs were used in Victorian times, planted around outhouses to disguise unpleasant smells? I always find fun facts like that really interesting. And here in this hillside area, you will see that there is some landscape fabric that is suppressing some really gnarly weeds like Japanese pokeweed and mugwort. And since this is a really difficult area to garden in, all I have planted here is mostly ground covers. And as you go up on the flatter part, there is some shrubs and trees. But in this space where we put this landscape grade or greenhouse grade landscape fabric, I have been mulching it with rocks that we dig up in our garden. And I think it's looking really pretty. There's always lots of rocks when we dig to plant anything in our garden. So I collect them in a bucket, I place them here, and it's serving as a rock mulch. And I love the way that these blue rug junipers are growing over the rocks. I think it looks really pretty. So I have these blue rug junipers planted all along this hillside to work as an evergreen living ground cover. And check out this beauty. This is a conifer called a Taylor's Sunburst Pine. And in the spring, all of the new growth comes out in this bright golden yellow. It is gorgeous. This is also an Isley conifer. Look at that. Isn't that so pretty? I love this one so much. That yellow makes it so vibrant that you can spot it from across the garden. Our royal purple smoke bush is also getting ready to bloom, and these are a beautiful shrub. You can either grow them as a large shrub or a small tree, and you can see that it has all of its bloom buds. But what I really love about it is this deep and beautiful red color and the shape of the foliage. It has almost like a rounded shape, which makes them really interesting. And here on the south side of the garden is an area I don't show often. It's a hill, so it's hard to garden on, but also it's very utilitarian. It's where we have our AC units. But you might recall that last season I had some green and yellow euonymus planted in this area that had seen better days. The deer always ate on it and it just looked awful. So I removed it and I planted these proven winners, Midnight Sun Weigela. They are currently in bloom and the pollinators love them. I see bees buzzing all over them, and they have these really pretty light pink blooms. And when they're done blooming, the foliage will get a little bit larger and it'll turn shades of red and burgundy and a little bit purple. Very pretty. So I like that they're compact, getting only about between 1 and 2 feet tall and wide. And I think they were a great addition to this space. And coming around to the front borders, you can see that everything is looking nice and lush and green. The good thing about having beds that are densely planted like this is that there's less room for weeds to grow. It also means less mulching. So these beds have gotten pretty filled out over the last several years. The penstemon in the front is getting ready to bloom. The candy corn spirea, which is one of my favorites, is looking nice and bright. And the nepeta is blooming. There were also lots of alliums and concertina iris that were blooming in this bed, but because it has been so windy, they got knocked around quite a bit and didn't last as long as I had hoped. You can see that there's some iris that has fallen there, and the alliums are all tipped over. I often get questions about that conifer there during garden tours. That is a blue atlas cedar trained into a serpentine or S shape. And we just went through and trimmed it, and it's putting out all of its spring growth and looking really pretty. But we had a Colorado blue spruce planted in this corner, so it still looks like something's missing because we haven't planted the replacement yet. But we have found a replacement and it's going in this week, weather allowing, and I can't wait to share it with all of you. I'm really excited about it. But while that Colorado blue spruce was planted, it was taking up so much space that I had forgotten that there was actually a baptisia or a false indigo planted there. And this year it's actually blooming because it's getting some light. Here's a close-up of that baptisia. This is the Decadence Pink Lemonade, and the blooms start off with a bit of a pink hint and then they go a little yellow. Look at that, like a light buttery yellow. Very pretty. And I have a clematis that's growing up through the center that is currently on the floor because I don't have a trellis for it to grow up over. I have to move it, but I'm going to wait until the fall to do that. And please don't mind all of the weeds. This is an area that is under construction, so we'll have to ignore that for now. But this is a very pretty baptisia, and I'm happy to have rediscovered it, and I will make sure to give it enough space to grow into its full size. Let's go ahead and check out that peony that has opened up as it's getting warmer out now, and hope that we don't see my resident snake that likes to come and scare me when I'm working in this area. But look at this beautiful shrub too. This is a false spirea, and it has been here for several years. It does have the tendency to get carried away. It will send out runners and can get pretty large, but I do trim it back every season to keep it size controlled because I really love the way that it looks in this area. It has this gorgeous ferny-like texture, and the new growth is yellow and pink and just really beautiful. And right on the side of the false spirea, I have a very mature Wine and Roses Weigela, and there are bumblebees buzzing in and out of it right now because it's in bloom and looking really beautiful. I really love the contrast of this dark foliage against the green in the garden, specifically on the side of this false spirea. I think it works really well together. Now, this is a very mature Weigela. I've had it here for about 6 years or so now, and it has gotten quite large. Now, our hose is there behind the false spirea, and when I pull it out, I think it sometimes gets caught in the middle of the Weigela, which is why it's splitting in that area there. See that? So I think I'm going to rejuvenation prune it after it's done blooming, take it down by about a half, clean out all of the dead wood in the center, and see how it does, see how it reflushes out. And maybe I'll sacrifice blooms for next year, but I'm hoping to give it a better shape. But there's a little bumblebee that's buzzing in and out of these beautiful little pink bell-shaped blooms. This peony is called Bowl of Beauty, and it really is a beauty. It's got this really bright fuchsia pink color with a yellow center, And there are 2 that are in bloom and 4 about to open, and another bud down there below. But it coordinates really nicely with this Semfall spirea right behind it, because it plays off of the pink on the new growth. And then there is the pink blooms of the Weigela right behind it. So I think this looks really lovely together. And my spring porch pots are still looking really lovely. Now, I started a lot of these flowers from seed, some violas, some pansies, and even all of this alyssum that you see. The alyssum is so easy to start from seed, and you pretty much go from seed to bloom in about 6 weeks. And they're so prolific. You can actually shear them back and they'll bush back out. They do better in cooler temperatures, so I'm sure they're going to peter out pretty soon in the next few weeks as it warms up. But currently, I'm really enjoying them. Look how many flowers are on these, on both sides. Isn't that so pretty? And the violas that I started from seed as well, they were called Florist Mix. The seed pack had all different colors in them, and I didn't know what color they were going to be until they started blooming. But what was fun is that so far, all of the violas have been different. So there's these light purple and yellow ones, those darker purple and yellow in the back. This is some of the Dusty Miller that I also grew from seed. The variety is called New Look, and it's a really pretty foliage accent. And I did pick up some Saxifraga, which is still blooming, the little dainty pink bloom in the center. So I'm going to transplant those out. I have a spot picked out in the garden because they are perennial. I've already cleaned out some of the planters that had tulips and hyacinth that the foliage had died back. And I'm making room to do my summer planters, which I will be starting over the next week. I'm always excited to change these out for a new season, but I'm also conflicted because these flowers still look so pretty. Now this here is the Black Devil Pansies. I bought the seeds from Baker Creek, and they are a true black flower. They are so striking, and this is probably the closest you're going to get to a black bloom. They look like velvet. They're really beautiful, and I love them. And in the basket with the Black Devil Pansies, I also have some more violas, and those are dark purple, light purple, and cream. And right behind, I have a planter with some nasturtiums that we started from seed. Now, nasturtiums have beautiful foliage. They look like lily pads. They're also a cool weather flower, so they do better with the cooler temperatures of spring and fall. I thought that this variety here, the Cherry Rose, was going to be a shade of fuchsia because that's what it looked like on the seed packet. But it turns out it is a very bright red. But it looks okay with these blue colored pansies as well as the white alyssum. It looks very appropriate for Memorial Day, and I do actually like them, even though red is not my preferred color. But with a little bit of the breeze that we have going on, you're getting the fragrance of this alyssum, which smells like honey, and it is lovely. And look at that. So the alyssum with a nasturtium, and you can see that it is a very vibrant red. It actually looks very pretty. And some more violas. And I have a container in the back there that repeats the violas with the alyssum and the Dusty Miller. I had some primrose that were in these containers as well that I had purchased, and the primrose was done, so I took it out. Because it is perennial, I planted it out in the landscape, and I put in these blueberry swirl phlox that I grew from seed, and they're starting to bloom, and I think that's going to look really pretty in this planter. Now we're coming around to my main front border. This is where my walkway is, where every year I plant my gomphrena up and down the walkway. But first, we have to give these beauties a moment to shine. So during my April garden tour, the tulips were in bloom and looking really lovely all along the front of this border. In May, the alliums took over. I have a lot of purple sensation alliums planted in this area. And the iris are coming into bloom. The salvia is also picking up, and the nepeta. And pretty soon, in the next couple of weeks, my double pink knockout roses will steal the show as we head into June. They are all budded up and getting ready to go. I also have a wine and roses weigela on this side that matches the one on the opposite side of the porch, and it's in bloom. And just this week, I had gone over to Lowe's and they had a sale on perennials. They were 2 for $10, but if you bought individuals, they were $5 each. And they had this really pretty lupin. It's called the Mini Gallery Red, this variety. And even though it's called red, it's actually like a deep rose color, which I thought was really pretty. And I'm loving the way that it looks with that weigela right behind it. And so I have a little drift of 3 right around this corner. They're only supposed to be about 18 to 20 inches in diameter, so we will see. I'm hopeful that it'll kind of just fill up this space in the corner here until this hydrangea starts putting on its blooms. So this is a tiny quickfire that we planted last season, and it's looking really good. And right behind it, I have a Proven Winners plant that I'm trialing in my garden. This was sent to me and it should go out to garden centers next year. It's called the Violets Are Blue Delphinium. It's going to be 30 to 36 inches in height. It likes full sun to part sun and needs 18 to 24 inch spacing. Hardy in zones 3 through 7 or down to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit. I love delphiniums, and if it does get to be 30 to 36 inches, I think that's the perfect spot for it, right behind this tiny quickfire and these lupin. And let's go through some of these really pretty irises that are in bloom. So this one here is called Stage Lights, and it has a really pretty light peach apricot color on top, and these purple falls with a little bit of an orange inside there. It's gorgeous. I did have to put up some supports because it has been so windy and these blooms are so heavy that they get knocked over fairly easily, but they are gorgeous. And this purple beauty is called Cantina. And what's great about this iris is that it's a reblooming iris, which is lovely. So we'll get their first flush right now at the end of May, and about 6 to 8 weeks later, we will get some more blooms. And this one has sort of an iridescent color to it. It is stunning. If you've been around the channel for a little while, you might recall that last fall I picked up some pretty parasols echinacea to replace some echinacea in this area that was supposed to be white and had turned purple. And the long and short is that I bought some pretty parasols at a local nursery at the end of the season on sale. Well, only this one has returned, which is such a bummer. I had planted 4. This one looks like it's doing okay. One other one just started to sprout, and 2 are complete duds. So a little disappointing, but it's how it goes. But in other news, I have some foxgloves that self-seeded that are getting ready to bloom. I have some here and some more down the border there. And here you can see that we have an evergreen called a Boulevard Cypress. George and I went through and pruned it the other day, gave it a really nice shape, but it's looking pretty unsightly because as you clip these nice and tight, what happens is it starts to expose some of the dead wood underneath, and I'm hopeful that it will flush out with some new growth. We did fertilize it as well, so we'll see how it goes. It's been here for upwards of 10 years, so it's possible that it's just run its course in our garden, and if it continues to look unsightly, we're going to have to think about replacing it next season, but we'll see how things go this year. And this candy corn spirea, also looking really beautiful and bright. Pretty soon it's going to transition from this yellow color to a chartreuse color, and it's already starting to bud up, and it gets these really pretty clusters of pink blooms. Against the chartreuse foliage, it is just gorgeous. You can actually see a little bit of that happening already back there. My Tamakiyama lace leaf maple is also looking really beautiful. Some more alliums as we head down the walkway. And you can see what I mean about the foliage right here. That's a good place to demonstrate that. See how it looks really messy. Not my favorite. But up here it looks really pretty. And I have some iris that's blooming in this area. Now this iris I thinned last year and I gave away a bunch to friends in my garden club because it is so prolific. So this one is called First Pick, and it's a really beautiful purple iris with some cream on the falls. Looking at the border from the other end, you can see that our Hinoki cypress in the corner here has also put on quite a bit of growth. And right in front of it, we have a gold mop cypress, which used to be a shrub, but one day I decided that it had gotten too big for this corner, and George and I sat on the floor and we trimmed it into a small topiary tree. And I have a video on the channel when we did that, so I will go ahead and link that below. But I like it much better this way. And we actually have to go through and trim it again because you can see that it's put on quite a bit of width. So we're gonna go through and trim this corner off and thin it out a bit so that it will be more wispy. There are some more iris that are going to bloom here. This is called whale's tail, which is the beautiful blue and purple variety. Well, that brings us to the end of the May garden tour. Let me know in the comments what's blooming and looking lovely in your garden as we head into the end of May. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I will catch you in the next one.